Excuse me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. My name is Councillor Tom Bennett. I'm one of the Vice Chairman of the committee, and I'm chairing this evening's meeting. To my right are my fellow councillors, and it is the five of us who will be making the decisions on the cases this evening. I'll let them introduce themselves, starting at the end.
Emma Dunkcode from St Helens Ward.
Councillor Lloyd North, representing Camden Ward.
Councillor Roberto Whedon-Sands from Queensgate.
Councillor Sonia Zvednyuk from Chelsea Riverside Ward.
And to my left is the officer team who will be presenting tonight's cases and advising us on those cases. And the officer team this evening is led by Fiona Ray, just to my left. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I believe we have no apologies for absence. Is that correct? Yep.
That's right, Chair.
Thank you. Second item is declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have an interest they would wish to declare? No? No declarations of interest. We have two sets of minutes to sign off that were circulated before the meeting. Are members happy for me to sign off those minutes? Great. Right, so we have 9 cases this evening, so I'll just read out the order that we'll be hearing them in. We're going to start with number 76 Kensington Park Road, then number 40 to 41 Hands Place, then number 25 Courtfield Gardens, number flat 4 11 Palace Gardens Terrace, number 21 Silchester Road, the Shaftesbury Centre on 85 Balby Road, Barlow House on Woolmer Road, 17 to 19 Pelham Place, and then finally number 26 Kempsford Gardens. For the benefit of anyone who has not attended one of these meetings before, the basic format is that we have the case presented, then both the objectors and the applicant will get an opportunity to make a short speech. Normally that's 3 minutes, but if there's a councillor present, that councillor gets an additional 2 minutes. If there's more than one objector or applicant for a case, you have to share that time between you. So just make sure you stick to the 3 minutes, and we need to be fairly strict on that for procedural reasons. We'll then get a chance for the committee to ask you questions, and then we ask questions of the officers, and then we make a decision on the case. So that's the basic outline. Right, well, I think that's it in way of introduction, so we'll proceed to the first case this evening, number 76 Kensington Park Road. Evening, number 76 Kensington Park Road.
Good evening, Chairman and everyone. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. We'll repeat. But thank you for that. Yes, as noted, the first item on tonight's agenda
number
is
76 Kensington Park Road.
Oh, that's strange. Good evening, Chairman and everyone. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. We'll repeat. But thank you for that. Yes, as noted, the first item on tonight's agenda
number
is
76 Kensington Park Road.
Oh, that's strange. Good evening, Chairman and everyone. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. We'll repeat. But thank you for that. Yes, as noted, the first item on tonight's agenda
number
is
76 Kensington Park Road.
Oh, that's strange. Good evening, Chairman and everyone. Sorry, I don't know what
This is it for the rest of the evening.
But thank you for that. Yes, as noted. Great, that's what I sound like. All right. So firstly, I'll just draw members' attention to the addendum report, which highlights further objections received following the publication of the officer's report. So the application site contains a Victorian terrace building set on the northeastern side of the street. The site contains a large rear extension that covers the entirety of the former garden and is linked internally to number 65 Portobello Road to the east. The ground and lower ground floor were in use as a former antiques arcade, and I'll touch on a little bit about the proposed use later in the slides. Planning permission is sought in this case, sorry, the slides was wrong, for external alterations comprising the removal of hard standing, which currently conceals the front light well, and its replacement with paved lights and walk-on metal grills. Also proposed is the installation of air conditioning units and equipment featuring acoustic loops, and the installation of a kitchen extract and flue set within brick slips clad enclosure. The proposed works are required as part of the conversion of the premises to a restaurant. This change of use would not require planning permission and is not part of the current proposals. It is noted that the previous application of the site was refused, and dismissed at appeal. The main reasons for the refusal relate to the design and appearance of the rear flue. This slide provides a comparison of the existing, refused, and now currently proposed rear elevation. The officer has concluded that the proposals have now overcome the previous reasons for refusal related to design and would continue to preserve the character, appearance, and significance of the wider conservation area. The officer has also concluded that the proposed development will continue to ensure good living conditions for occupiers of neighbouring dwellings. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take questions in due course.
Thank you. Right, we have 4 people registered to speak in objection of this case, including Councillor Bakhtiar. Councillor Bakhtiar, you have 2 minutes separate from the 3 minutes the other objectors. Would you like to speak first or second?
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to speak first.
Okay, well, 2 minutes, Councillor Bakhtiar, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, I would like to draw your attention that this application is affecting children, family members, children from the entire local community around the proposed application. This application, as the officer stated, it was rejected, turned down by the rejected again by the inspectorate, and we don't see any fundamental changes from the original application. I have visited the site. The flue, and it's 2 meters from Leona's bedroom and her children's bedroom, 2 meters. It's affecting the family. I will stop here. I will allow the other objectors to take time. Thank you.
Okay, and the other objectors have up to 3 minutes between you. Just so you know, registered speakers Leona Chan, Fiona Fleming-Brown, and Janet Brown. And as I say, please share those 3 minutes however you wish.
I'm Leona Chan of 74A Kensington Park Road. I've got 3 main objections to this application. It failed to preserve the character of the conservation area. Secondly, it failed to address the air quality, overheating, and fire risk. Finally, it ignores the current condition needed to safeguard the amenities of the resident. The plant, machinery, and the flue are far too close to the neighbouring homes. The flue is right in front of my terrace, affecting our daily outdoor use, especially for our children. The tall duck is an eyesore in a residential area with back gardens. Since the registration of this application, unsurprisingly, the applicant's appeal of the last proposal was rejected. The issue considered by the inspector are entirely applicable to the current scheme, so the dismissal is a clear and material consideration to the committee. The dismissal cited the flue dimension as substantial. It clashed with other elements of the rear elevation, clearly seen from the Portobello Road and by lots of the neighbours, with no comparable flues nearby. The current scheme is worse. It's 50% bigger than the rejected one, so more prominent. While the new proposed flue has been moved slightly away from my balcony, this makes little difference. It still wants the whole 5-story, towering above the existing parapet to the same height as of the refused scheme. The inspector's important concern about the size, the seating, and the placement hasn't been addressed. This application failed to meet the standard of the policy GB9, CD1, 2, 3, 9, 10, 13, and 15 of the Local Plan 2024. The inspectorate stressed that given the public harm it caused, the installation should be rejected. We urge the committee to follow this advice. Nor are environmental impact of the plant operations considered. Ladbroke Association's suggestion of the soundproofing of the wall disregarded. No air quality assessment has been undertaken. The applicant's own overheating report stated that the machinery will cause persistent overheating when in operation due to the envelope structure and that it failed the industry test. This is compounded by the applicant's exemption from filing a planning fire safety strategy, which they warmly claim that it is a minor installation. How can a 78 pages detailed machinery installation plan be minor when the machinery poses significant fire risk for the restaurant patrons and the residents living above and nearby? Finally, the 1997 consent for the Link building was only granted subject to restrictive condition to safeguard the amenities of the neighbours. Condition 5 stated that no machine installed shall cause harm to the amenities of the area by noise, vibration and smell. The officer's report ignored these protections. Approving this application will violate all these long-standing conditions, undermine the planning policy and the community's trust in the planning process. With over 150 objections, we hope that you will listen and address our concern and prioritize the well-being and the safety of the residents by rejecting this case. Thank you.
And there's another minute or so if other objectors would like to add.
I'm the chair of the Pembridge Association. You've heard from the ward councillors and residents and even planning inspector quotes citing why this application should be rejected. It also proposes changes which will detrimentally impact the character and setting of two conservation areas, Pembridge and Ladbroke. The current vista shows roof angles and a tree framed by buildings on either side. The proposed ducting wouldn't improve, but will mar this view as it extends above the parapet. The inspector rightly described this as out of scale with adjacent homes and alien to its setting. Cladding an industrial duct in brick to make a giant chimney is fake history. These sorts of chimneys aren't and haven't ever been characteristics of the residential properties in Kensington Park Road. And cladding it will sadly make this unwanted feature even larger and more intrusive. It's ludicrous to claim that only one property in the Pembridge Conservation Area will be impacted when this gap next to the Rogers Arcade is a street view seen by thousands of passers-by in Portobello Road. The property's had a complex planning history, but there are too many reasons here why this application is unsound. The applicant's already got a residential scheme consent. We urge him
Ms.
to
Fleming
use
Brown,
it.
Sorry, if I could just ask you to conclude. We're just coming to the end of the time, but obviously we'll ask you more questions shortly.
The applicant's already got a residential scheme consent. We urge him to use it and the committee to reject this commercial application.
Thank you very much. And for the applicant, I have Lawrence Brooker registered. Are you with us, Mr. Brooker?
Yep.
Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Welcome. You have up to 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair, and everybody for attending this evening. So, I'm Lawrence Brooker. I'm a director at Turley with the agents acting on behalf of the applicant. So, as the officer's report and presentation noted, this application follows an earlier iteration of a similar proposal which was recommended for approval but subsequently refused, as discussed, due to the impact of the proposed flue on the conservation area. We've therefore sought to address that previous reason for refusal through this revised scheme. The application site, as mentioned, it's a Class C unit located within the Portobello Road Special Shopping Centre, which is an internationally recognised and commercial centre of importance. It extends through from the main frontage on Portobello Road through to Kensington Park Road at the rear, where there is a secondary entrance and which is the focus of the work subject to this application. So as summarised, the application seeks to deliver the proposed mechanical equipment to support a potential restaurant occupier to the unit, which has been long vacant dating back to the COVID period, apart from very sparse use in that period, while delivering other enhancements to the Kensington Park Road elevation, which has been subject to quite unsympathetic alteration over the years. So the proposal reopens the infield light well on Kensington Park Road, installs railings around the light well to the benefit of the appearance of the frontage and its contribution to the conservation area, meaning that all those works will be more in fitting to the character and appearance of the building and the surrounding streetscape. The vaults, as mentioned, are used to house air conditioning units for the commercial unit, which are housed behind acoustic louvers to minimise any noise impacts to the street and surrounding area. So turning to the rear elevation, as discussed, a revised kitchen extract is proposed, including a revised location where it will now sit centrally on the rear elevation, tucked in against the existing closet wing extension. It's moved by circa 3 to 4 metres, as evidenced on the plans, and the flue is now clad in brick slips as discussed. These are two key revisions which we consider successfully address the previous reasons for refusal. A number of design measures are also incorporated to protect residential amenity, very conscious of that concern as just articulated by the objectors. All of these measures are cured by planning condition, and this includes minimising the extract width, with it now being clad in brick slips as discussed. There are anti-vibration mounts to be used in installing the extract and the air conditioning units. Acoustic housing and acoustic silencers are proposed to the air conditioning condensers. Acoustic silencers are proposed to the kitchen extract, and filtration to the restaurant extract is proposed for odour control, and that terminates above the roof line to ensure that any odours do disperse and not impact any residents. So therefore, the design of the proposal does seek to balance the need to bring the long vacant commercial unit back into viable use, while successfully redesigning the extract in response to the previous reason for refusal, and continuing to deliver those benefits to the frontage on Kensington Park Road. The proposal does seek to protect the amenity of neighbouring residents through good design and through the incorporation of mitigation measures where relevant, in line with RBKC policy, and as supported by environmental health officers and the overall officer recommendation to approve the application. We would also just note, we've noted some late representations by the Ladbroke Association and their request for some additional wording to condition 9 and an additional planning condition around the provision of sound insulation, which the applicant would be happy to agree to should the committee be minded to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move to questions from the committee, colleagues. Councillor Dentcote.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask Ms. Chan, if I may, that we heard your very robust response. So what is it specifically that having heard all the so-called mitigations or the mitigations that you've just heard, what are the specific issues that you think would affect your home? I'm assuming your house is right next door to it, the slightly lower house, yeah? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
My house is right next to it.
And there's did you say there was a roof terrace at the
yes,
back?
my roof terrace is right next to the food. Okay. I can see, the chimney just right coming in it.
Okay, so given what we've just heard, what are your ongoing concerns?
First of all, you mentioned this is your home, you're living there because the original site is a back garden, it's not even supposed to be for use because they are illegally occupied for more than 10 years. So that's why, they got it linked. So both sides are backed by back gardens of all the residents live by. There's no such features as a tall, 5-story tall over the parapet, and then totally inconsistent, unsympathetic, ugly, fruit right next to your home suddenly. So when you open your balcony from my bedroom every day and with the children, and it's the only outdoor space I have, and then right there is the duck up, next to you. And then in the past, the arcade is only used for 1 day a week, and now, this is used 7 days continuously, and then to emit all these flue, and then, and also the size of it was substantial, out of scale. And it was 500 times 500 before, and then the inspector come round and visit and say that this is not acceptable. It cause more public harm than any benefits. And now this one is 750 times 750, even 50% bigger than the rejected one, even more prominent. And so to me, this is like totally, unreasonable to put something so substantial, not residential, into a totally residential area for that. And also the fire safety is another main concern for us and all the residents, because in that it say that the overheating report that's committed by the applicant himself say that it failed the industry test, and the conclusion is that it will constantly, the whole of the building overheat whenever it's in operation. But then in the officer's report it say that it is acceptable. I don't understand why the failed report would be acceptable. And also, it also said that they filed an exemption not to have a fire safety planning strategy because it's just a minor installation. How could a super giant, chimney, 5-story attached to your building, cladded, will cause no fire issue, and it's a minor installation. And because the linked building, which is linked with the whole thing, has got no exit, because it's about 50 meters long, because it used to be a back garden. So it's all enclosed and as an envelope structures. So because with the terrible incident happened in the council before. As you know, that everyone's so worried about the cladding, the fire, and it's not only affecting the people at the restaurant, it's also affecting the people living above and all the residents nearby.
Yeah.
So
Thank
this
you.
is very...
I just have a quick follow-up question, sorry. Just focusing, I take all your sort of various points, the answer to that, but just focusing particularly on the impact of the 750 by 750 milliliter chimney on your window and your terrace. Is your concern that it will provide a greater sense of enclosure, or that it will block out daylight? So aside from the aesthetics of it, what's your, is it more a sense of enclosure or blocking daylight, or something else?
The size of it is unacceptable because there's no similar thing in that conservation area. And, you know, the old rejected one, as agreed by the inspector before, in this inspectoral, the 500 is already out of scale. And there's no similar fruit like that in the whole of this terrain set of buildings. And the current one is 750 times 750. So rather than addressing the concern and the rejection raised by the inspector, they now suggest an even bigger, you know, a fruit chimney in it. So I just do not understand how...
So it's mostly the concern is that it's out of place and not in keeping with the conservation area.
Absolutely, it is totally not, and it is right next to the windows of the opening of the residence, you know, because it's residential apartment upstairs.
Understood. Councillor Dencode and then Councillor Zvedeniak.
Thank you. I just have a follow-up question. I understand all your concerns have been focused on the flu and the effect on the flu and so on. I was just wondering if you were also concerned about the noise from people dining at night, because especially in summer when windows might be open or there's any kind of mitigation, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Is that also a concern of yours?
Sorry. Yeah, you should. Yeah.
Hello. I'm called Janet Brown. I'm one of the speakers. Yes, we're super concerned because that, what was formerly an arcade 1 day a week, only open on Saturdays, it's probably going to be planned to be a restaurant, and it will hold maybe 100 people. And so the windows, if they're going to be open, I'm 20 feet, in fact, I'm 20 feet away from, my bedroom is 20 feet away from this. I'm sorry, I don't think the mic's working properly. So we're worried about noise, we're worried about fire, worried about light. We've made all these all the objections that have been put in, which has been about 150 of them, generally refer to these things anyway. With regards to the new dimensions of the flus are notorious for being smelly, noisy, as you say, vibrations. I think even the cladding that is going to be put around this flue could really be quite dangerous. And I think the main thing for me, apart from the light and the noise, and is we're so concerned about the fire risk of this building running through our back gardens. It's quite a tiny, intimate area, which the Planning Inspectorate and several other people have seen. And we are terrified, really, that it could be really, really a dangerous place to have plant machinery on a catering level, on a catering, size, as it were. I think there was about... Oh, I don't know what this says here, I can't read my notes, but you get the drift. It's dangerous, it's noisy, it's smelly, it's the wrong location for a restaurant. I mean, it's a tiny back garden area, and as I've said, it's 20 feet away from my bedroom. I'm a pensioner, I'm at home all day, there's little kids trying to do their homework. It's really, really an abomination. I think I've made my case clear, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zvedeniak.
Thank you. A question for the applicant. So, obviously, I think to some, this might seem like a minor installation, but you've notified 19 properties and we've received 50 objections, and there's clearly just a lot of strong feeling amongst residents. So I wonder what kind of consultation or engagement was done with the local residents, and whether their concerns have been heard and there have been efforts made to ease some of those concerns, and I suppose how, if this were to go ahead, how you would maintain goodwill with the local community, given there's so much strength of feeling in the room. I can't sort of see how this sort of ends well, really, given what we've heard tonight.
Yeah, so just to pick up on a couple of those points, I think the efforts to address the concerns I think we've run through in terms of the design, you know, the mitigation measures are comprehensive and extensive. I guess part of the tension is that classic central London interface between Portobello Road, which is an internationally renowned commercial street, I think we can all agree that, and residential properties, which is a classic central London situation. If you go up Portobello Road, go up any commercial street in K&C, with a restaurant, an extract like this is a common feature. You know, they're standard pieces of equipment that are subject to extensive testing. They're well-worn and well-used pieces of equipment that are designed to manage all of the concerns that have been raised tonight, effectively. In terms of the long-term relationship, I think if a tenant comes in, there will obviously be a need for them to potentially do some works to the link building itself. I think some points were raised about noise, light spillage, that kind of thing. There are restrictions on the link building at the moment in terms of windows not being opened and that kind of thing, which would obviously give hopefully some comfort on those matters, but there would be most likely a future application that could deal with some of those points that were raised, and we'd obviously look to take as much of that into account as possible.
Thank you. And just one follow-up question. And are you able to respond to some of the comments made by the objectors, specifically the brick-clad flue being bulkier than the original proposal, and secondly the air quality assessment?
Yep.
And there was mention of a failed report. Are you able to talk us through that?
Yeah, so an air quality assessment was undertaken, and it recommended the inclusion of the mitigation measures that are proposed as part of the application. The flue dimensions have not changed. It's 500 by 500, which is as per the refuse scheme. What has changed is the additional bulk that comes in through the cladding, and the cladding has been introduced to address the previous reason for refusal in relation to the impact on the conservation area. It's as straightforward as that.
Yes, Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very quick one, I guess, for the applicant, and then I'll move on to the objectors. But just on that point of the cladding, obviously part of the inspector's refusal was the visual impact, but it also mentions the height, length, and size, general size of the flue, and the fact that the inspector isn't convinced that there is no alternative to the flue pipe. And so I'm just wondering what the reasoning was for, what alternatives did you look at, or if there's a particular reason why you've come back with the same proposal?
Yeah, so I guess the general, again, if you take a walk up and down Portobello, look at other commercial properties, you'll see a similar situation. Basically, the flues always terminate at least 1 metre above roof level for the very reason of minimising any impacts on neighbouring properties, because it's about dispersal of any odours and all the rest of it. We looked at other options. The key thing is that the only location that a kitchen can be accommodated in this property is at the rear. It's proposed to go in the lower levels, so it's kind of away and containable from the rest of the units, and therefore it leads to the proposed flue location being up the back of the elevation of the property. Other options that you sometimes see is kind of extract through the facade of the building. That's not possible here, and is obviously less desirable from a residential amenity perspective. So that's why the flue is as proposed.
And I guess just the sort of the opposite angle to the objectors. I mean, particularly I think to Mrs. Fleming-Brown, given your experience at planning committees, is looking at this and looking at the reasons it was objected to. But the visual amenity, the things that some of the objectors have mentioned aren't things that the inspector mentioned. The things that he refused it on were the visual impact and the size and the height. And so I guess from your perspective, it would be good to hear a bit more about why you think that the brick glazing, because I hate to say in the presentation we saw at the beginning and in the pack we've got, I mean, it does look almost sort of quite hidden. And so perhaps just to hear from you about your opinion, why that isn't enough, as it were.
Yeah. I'm part of the Council's Market Streets Action Group, as well as the chair of the Pembridge Association. So these issues are ones that we debate endlessly. The thing that most concerns me is Lawrence refers to it being a commercial street. What you're actually talking about in Portobello Road is very small, low-built, colourful antiques arcades. And indeed, that's what the applicant's premises was originally. So at the moment, you've got a low-built arcade, you've got a gap, which is how most people would actually see this giant chimney, and then you've got another low-built building. If you look at the moment, you see, as if it were in a picture frame, the butterfly roof of the premises in Kensington Park Road, and behind it a tree, and it recedes as a view. If you put a giant brick-clad chimney straight in the middle of that, it's going to resemble a mill town. These are not typical chimneys that are found anywhere in the conservation area. It's a piece of dressing up, it's a piece of theme parkery, which we really don't need. Portobello Road is a cultural icon, and the views should be protected, particularly views through gaps. And if this duct is placed there, it will also set an undesirable precedent all the way along Kensington Park Road for other premises. It's not a good thing in itself. It would be a disastrous thing for the conservation areas. It's not a commercial area known for restaurants. The thousands of tourists that come don't say, let's go to Portobello Road to see a restaurant. They say, let's go to Portobello Road to see the Antiques Arcade. We need to protect those views. We need to protect the character, setting, and ambience of the area. There are enough restaurants owned by this applicant in this area to more than saturate the demand. Thank you.
Councillor North.
Thank you. Actually, some of the points that I've already been touched on, I'd just like to take, if I could ask the objector, Ms. Fleming-Brown, on the conservation angle of it again, just to take you further on that. There's obviously the previous scheme that you'd mentioned and the current scheme. Could you tell us why you believe that the current scheme is worse than that? I'll ask the same with the officers on a conservation area basis, and then I've got another follow-up on the flu issue.
The bar to get something turned down or dismissed at appeal is high. It's not easy. And I think one of the material considerations here is we shouldn't be bringing the planning system into disrepute by dismissing some of the things the planning inspectorate have said. They said very clearly that the tower structure was too big, and they said it was too dominant and it would be alien to the setting. So increasing the size by cladding it in a chimney, which isn't part of the setting, which has no precedent and no type of this building anywhere in the surrounding area, is not a good thing in two conservation areas.
And with regard to the height of the chimney, can the objectors confirm it is the same height of the existing chimneys on the other buildings either side? From the information we've got here, it looks to be the same in height-wise. I'm not talking about in bulk.
No, it is not. It is on its own, higher above the roof parapet, and there's no similar height as that. It stands out as on its own, which is cutting all across the whole set of the Terrace building, which is cited by the inspector that this is totally unacceptable.
So just to clarify, you're saying it's higher than the existing chimneys?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll ask that. I'll double check with the officers. Thank you.
Colleagues, any further questions before we move to questions to officers? No. In which case we end this section of the meeting and we now move on to the sections where members of the section where members of the committee can ask officers questions. Who would like to ask the first question? Councillor North.
Yes, can I just follow up on what I just said about the height of the proposed chimney stack? Is it any higher than the other chimney stacks that are the original ones attached to the buildings? And my second question actually is about the positive effect or negative effect or neutral effect on the conservation area. We've heard a lot about that tonight, and I'd like to hear your opinion. Does it contribute a positive effect, and if so, how? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have a drawing that compares the exact height of the flue in comparison to the chimney stacks on the rest of the terrace, but I do know it's a little over a metre taller than the parapet wall, which is comparable to the other chimneys, but I couldn't tell you exactly the dimensions of the chimneys, I'm afraid.
I'm looking at the pictures that you've provided where it says photo of existing rear facade, and the building to the left has a brick-edged chimney which is faced to one side in white, and then the actual building itself set back from the railings is a chimney. And I'm just thinking, is it the same height as that, or is it even higher? It looks to me to be the same height, but I've heard from the objectors that it's higher.
Just to confirm, are you referring to this image?
The page, no, there's a photograph actually. It's a photograph of the existing facade. It's on the page where those three images are in our packs.
In the packs rather than in the presentation.
Yeah, it's labelled as photo of existing rear facade.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem. Just bear with me a minute while I find that.
Yeah, there aren't any page numbers.
If you go on to your first or second slide in the presentation.
Second slide.
Is that top photo?
Top left
That
photo
top left
there.
photo.
Yeah. So I draw your attention to the chimney stack to the building to the left, which the front is painted in white, but the actual right-hand side is probably original brick. And then the set back, which will be halfway along inward from the butterfly roof, would be the chimney stack existing with terracotta pots on the top. I'm just wondering about the height, because we've heard from the objectors that it's higher than the existing original ones.
Well, I'm just having a look at that image now, and you can see the railings sit slightly below the top of the chimney pots. And if I refer back to the rear elevation, this would also sit just above the railings. So based on that, it looks like it is comparable. But again, I don't have exact dimensions, but it does look comparable to me in terms of height.
And this one here. Yeah, that was my understanding. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. And then you asked about impact on conservation area.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so a few important points have been made already around the differences in the previously refused scheme and the currently proposed. While I still have this image up, you can see the middle elevation is the refused scheme that has the exposed flue and located on the left of the building when looking from the rear, whereas the current proposal proposes the exact same equipment, the only difference being it being encased in brick slips. The reason for encasing in brick slips, as mentioned already, was to help disguise the flue to some degree and allow it to harmonise a little bit better than the existing proposed did, which made, I suppose, no attempt to harmonise the surroundings. It's for that reason, it's more discreet location and it's the use of brick slips that the officer has concluded that the current proposal has overcome that previous reason for refusal. Also important to note that that was the only reason for refusal in the inspector's decision, which is a material consideration in this case. So it's for, I suppose, members to decide whether or not they agree that the efforts made to conceal the flue is sufficient to overcome the previous reason for refusal or not, as the officer has recommended.
Thank you very much. I had a quick question. So, one of the things we've heard a bit about tonight is the impact that having a restaurant could have on neighbours and residents, particularly large numbers of people attending restaurants, 7 nights a week, etc. Completely understandable thing for neighbours to be concerned about. Am I right in saying, though, and could you clarify that it's not from a planning perspective, not relevant to this application, because it is a Class E property and it's not a particular restaurant looking to move in here. So, so it's not actually one of our considerations for this particular application.
Yes, that is correct. A change of use to a restaurant would not require planning permission, as it would not be deemed development, and the inspector has concluded the same. So you're correct.
I think it's just important to clarify that. Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Just a quick clarification, please, on I think one of the objections mentioned a restrictive covenant of some sort on the site about specifying sort of amenity and things. I just wondered if you were aware or could clarify what that was.
I'm not aware of a legal covenant, but I'm aware of some past conditions related to a historic application for that full-length extension itself. The conditions were related to the windows of that extension. That condition, I suppose, would still be enforceable today. It's still relevant. However, the current proposals don't relate to that extension itself. And so therefore we couldn't reoppose those conditions because they don't relate to what's actually being proposed under the current application. But any legal covenants or previous conditions related to other parts of the building would still be relevant and enforceable.
I have one other question, just to clarify, because we've heard mentions of, failed industry tests or claims by objectors of failed industry tests, specifically of fire risk. Could you just remind us what, as a planning authority, our responsibilities are around fire risk, and if and how we're confident that those have been met in this case?
Thank you. Yes, so the overheating report is a justification for the air conditioning units. It's a requirement as part of policy GB5, which seeks to reduce the reliance on air conditioning through passive measures of cooling the building. This doesn't relate to a failure of any of the equipment being proposed. It's just generally the building itself, similar to a house that requires AC or air conditioning, if they aren't able to achieve that through passive measures like shading or changing the windows, etc. So that the failure of that overheating report is what was used to justify the requirement for the air conditioning. So it's not the same as a fire risk or a failure of the mechanical equipment that would then result in fire. The applicant has submitted a reasonable exemption statement, which is permissible under policy CD16, related to the need for a fire safety strategy. And because that complies with the requirements of the condition, the officer has concluded it's acceptable.
Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions? Yes, Councillor North.
Sorry, just to follow on from my point earlier on, I found the paragraph that I was looking for in the inspector's report, and it relates to number 88. There is a flue existing there that's a painted metal one. Your consideration that this application scheme is better than that one, as well as the previous one. That was the bit I was looking for, number 88. It's on the picture on the right-hand side just, and it's in the inspector's report, section 7.
Sorry, if you just bear with me 1 second while I pull that up. So did you mean paragraph 8? Paragraph 8. 7, sorry, okay. Okay, so that's referring to other pipe work along the rear of the building. That pipe work would include rainwater ducts and other flues. But the inspector notes that the nearest, being 88 Kensington Park Road, appears to be more modest installation, hardly noticeable, etc. So this would be, of course, larger than that, remaining the same as previously proposed, 500 millimeters by 500 millimeters, although noting that the encasement would make that larger, as noted previously. But yes, this would be larger than that of the other pipes along the rear elevation, including that other flue.
Final thing is, I would like, before we move to vote, to add a condition to the proposal. Pembridge Society recommended a condition around approval of materials before construction takes place, particularly the brick slips we're talking about here. Would that be best as a new condition or as an addition to condition 8? I'm happy either way. Assume colleagues are happy with that as an additional condition.
Yes, that's perfectly reasonable. What we could do is amend condition 8 to require details. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. Everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Okay. In which case, assuming no further questions, we must move to a decision. I just want to reiterate that point we touched on at the start of questions to officers. We're not debating the principle of a restaurant here. It is Class E. It is allowed to be a restaurant. That's not what's in front of us. I think furthermore, I would say that the sort of principle of rooftop abstraction for restaurants in the borough is well established, and there are probably thousands, certainly hundreds of properties with rooftop extraction going past residential properties. And our environmental health officers tell us that this meets our sort of fairly strict environmental health guidelines. So I think, while I understand people would be concerned, I'm convinced from an environmental health point of view that there's not an issue here. So we come back to the reason the inspector overturned it in the first place, which was that was a visual reason that wasn't in keeping with the conservation area. I think the changes made, I would say it's pretty clear they ameliorate it, at least to some degree. It does blend in more with those brick slips, and it's certainly not, just doesn't stand out as much as it used to. Whether that's enough or not, I think members will have to decide for themselves, but I would say that is probably the key point on which to decide this case. Right, in which case we move to a decision. I'm just going to do show of hands. The recommendation with the change to condition 8 is to grant. Can I see all those in favour? All those against? So that's 3 against, 2 in favour. So thank you. So planning permission is not granted. We need to, could we propose a reason? One of the objectors propose a reason.
I'd just suggest that maybe the same reason as previously, which was considered by the inspector for consistency.
I would say, Chair, that we're opening a can of worms if we let this one through. They're going to get worse and worse and bigger and taller. And covering something with bricks, which is not going to match the original bricks.
Could you propose a reason? So not in keeping.
It's not in keeping.
Visually not in keeping.
Visually not in keeping. Is that good enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Could I have a seconder?
Just specifying height, length and diameter.
Including height, length and diameter.
I think I agree with officers.
You happy to second that, Councillor Wiedensense? Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Denko proposing, Councillor Wiedensense seconding. So can I have a vote on that as a reason? Could I see all those in favour? All those against? And I'll abstain on that, so that's passed, 4 in favour. So thank you very much for everyone who joined us for that case. We now move on to the second case, which is 40 to 41 Hands Place. We'll actually pause for just a minute to allow people to leave. We now move on to 40 to 41 Hans Place.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Before members this evening is an application for the substantial demolition, construction of a basement, front, rear and mansard extensions, rear roof terrace to form the creation of 7 new residential units representing an uplift of 5 at 40 to 41 Hans Place. Before you is a site location plan showing the 2 properties in question. They front onto Hans Place and have rear elevations towards the properties that back onto Walton Place. Here are some photos of the site. On the left you can see 40 Hans Place and on the right 41 Hans Place. Here are some elevations of the rear of the site, and you can see the properties that back onto the rear of the application site in the photo on the furthest most right of the screen. Here is an aerial view of the site showing mainly the rear elevations and the context of the application site with its neighbouring properties. Here are some further photos of the neighbouring property, from the neighbouring property. And here are some contextualised elevations showing the front and rear elevations in their existing context. This elevation shows the substantial demolition that is proposed to take place to the rear elevation. You can see the majority of the building is to be demolished as part of the proposal. Oh, sorry, that was the previous, and this is the new one. But again, you can see the extent of demolition there proposed. These are the floor plans, showing again areas of demolition and new build. And this is the previous scheme that members will remember came to committee earlier in the year, and the new scheme which has been sought to overcome previous reasons for refusal. These are some visuals of the proposed alterations. You can see that the large extension to the rear there is apparent within the gap between the 2 buildings. These are some CGI images demonstrating the rear of the property. And this is the current proposal showing the minor alterations to the scheme which show kind of the more curved rear elevation on the left-hand side of this CGI image, which has been sought to overcome some overshadowing and overbearing impacts to the neighbouring property. And here's some watercolour elevations. So it's pertinent for the committee members to understand that a previous application was refused by committee. That was on the 10th of September for 6 reasons. Substantial weight has been attached to this recent decision as a material consideration when determining this application and being recommended by officers. The new application was received shortly after, on the 7th of October, and the revised scheme sought to respond to the reasons for refusal. All of the reasons for refusal set out in the officer's report, which is within your pack. However, very briefly, to overcome the concerns raised, a payment in lieu of £1,051,635 is to be secured towards affordable housing due to the substantial demolition that is proposed to take place, and therefore that has been required to satisfy policy in regard to community housing. This is to be secured by a legal agreement. A fire statement has now been submitted and reviewed in detail by the Council's Building Control team, who no longer object to the application, and therefore this reason for refusal has been overcome. A revised construction method statement, which satisfies the Council's basement policy, has also been received and found to be acceptable by the Council's transport officers. Biodiversity and air quality information has also now been submitted. These matters are considered to overcome 4 out of the 6 reasons for refusal. There are 2 key remaining reasons for refusal that are considered to not be fully overcome by the proposal. This is the impact on neighbouring living conditions and the failure to meet urban greening factor standards as set by the London Plan. However, officers have considered the harm to living conditions, and on balance, they have considered that the proposal, when read as a whole, would be acceptable, and this reason for refusal has not been reattached, and the recommendation is to approve. The quality of some units have also been questioned. However, this did not form a specific reason for refusal and just carried negative weight in the planning balance, which is considered to be overcome by the overall merits of the scheme and public benefits. As such, on balance, it is recommended that this application, when taking the development plan as a whole, would be acceptable as explained in detail within the report. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Right, we have objectors and applicants registered. So we'll start with the objectors. Mr. Ford, are you with us? Kenneth Ford?
Yes, thank you.
Hello. Mr. Ford, you have up to 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I live at 43 Hans Place. I've done so for 26 years, and that is my principal residence. I speak for my fellow proprietors at 43, 2 further proprietors who have also objected. I hope not to take up my 3 minutes, because clearly, as far as I'm concerned, this is a cut and paste application based upon the previous one, which was refused. Needless to say, we were pleased with the refusal, not to frustrate the redevelopment, because clearly, as you've seen from the photographs, the site is not necessarily, the adjacent property, subject property is not that great. However, we wouldn't want to frustrate the redevelopment just per se, just that development, which is an overdevelopment of the site, as acknowledged in the refusal notice, now repeated with this application. The refusal also encouraged the applicant to engage with us, which they hadn't done previously, and they've now done. Whilst they've submitted all their outstanding reports, which they admitted to do in the first application, they haven't addressed the harmful impact and amenity loss arising from the scale and massing of the new application, which, as I say, is the same as the old one. It's the same floor area, plus 40% over the existing, the same scale and massing. So as such, I'm surprised that your officers are now able to recommend approval. Reading the report, the word slight appears 6 times in the 5 paragraphs referring to the neighbourhood impact, slight being defined as to a small degree. These are tweaks and amends to the refuse scheme, which I don't think are material. Comparative facts are the daylight and sunlight factors, metrics, they're the same failed metrics as the original scheme. Urban greening, officer referred to, the refused scheme had 0.11, the new scheme has 0.12. Your policy standard is 0.4. The sense of enclosure and outlook, which is material to me because I have an outside space there. The refused scheme had 4 additional stories at the rear elevation. This scheme has the same. The existing rear building line of 2.75 metres. The refused scheme had 5.75 metres. This scheme has 5.25 metres. That's an 18% improvement, sorry, an 18-inch improvement, but it still results in 77% loss of my outlook from my roof terrace, which is my only outside space. All of this is acknowledged in your report as creating a sense of enclosure and would not comply with your policies CD9 and 13. I hope that it's now clear to all that the revised scheme is materially the same as the refurbished one, as the refused one, with only token nibbles when set against your policies and neighbourhood harm. To the layman, the recommendation to flip from refusal to approval seems illogical and bizarre. During your debate last time, I recall you considered refusal or continuance to allow for further work to try to establish a less harmful and more compliant scheme. I believe a better solution than the one proposed before you now could be achieved, and it seems to me that if you're so minded, a continuance may be the way forward here, given that we have engaged with the applicant in short order from the last refusal. If you're so minded to do that,
we're just over time. Could I ask you to conclude, please?
Yes, well, I was just going to say I'll commit to continue to engage with the applicant to actually find a better solution for all. But if you actually continue to, if you don't believe in it is the same scheme and move to refuse, then I would so have thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're joined by a team on behalf of the applicant. So just to let you know who is registered to speak. It's Nick de Lobonnier, David Fuller, Elliot Smith, Kieran Davies, and Stephen Lebrant. So you have up to 3 minutes. I'll allow you slightly more to mirror the objector. So please start whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'm going to do the presentation, and my colleagues are here to answer questions. I just, in terms of what I'm going to say, I'd say a little bit about the background to this application, then deal with the objections that have been raised, and then deal with the planning benefits as I see them. In terms of background, this did go to a previous committee who supported the design, the height and the mass in urban design terms, and in particular the replacement of the negative contribution at number 41 with a new building to be built in a scholarly Queen Anne style, and the restoration of the lost Georgian features of number 40. The application has been subject to considerable public consultation and a public exhibition. 528 residents were consulted, and of those that made comments, 83 supported it, including, and importantly, the Chelsea Society. Since then, with the new application, there's been a further webinar and a meeting with Mr. Ford, and there are only 4 objections to this application. The scheme has been adjusted, and I will just focus very much on the residential amenity issue in my presentation. So it has been cut back where it joins number 43 at 3rd, 4th and 5th floor level. Previously the wall extended 2.2 metres out, it's now 1.4 metres, which is 35% less, and there have been extensive planting of the terraces to protect overlooking. I turn now to residential amenity. Firstly, daylight and sunlight. The previous scheme was not refused on daylight and sunlight. The cutbacks to 43 will improve the daylight and sunlight. We have now tested the terrace, which was an issue before, and there is a reduction in March, but in June, when one would expect people to be using a terrace, there's only a 6% loss, and it more than meets the 50% requirement of the BRE standard. Our daylight and sunlight expert can explain further. In terms of privacy, that was only concerned with the terraces, and they have been extensively planted. There's a 1 metre planting barrier along against 39, and also planting against 43, which has reduced the usable space, but will protect from overlooking. And lastly, in terms of sense of enclosure, this is a more subjective issue, but there are a number of criteria you look at. Firstly, sky view. There will be an extension on one of the views that you have out, the 1.4 metre wall, but you'll still get a fantastic sky view because it's very high up in the building. Sense of enclosure tends to be a problem lower down in the building. And also what one sees in the distance, generally if you have a 30% increase in what you see in the distance, that is a harmful sense of enclosure. But this is looking over rooftops, gaps between buildings. It still has a very good sense of outlook, and a much better outlook in terms of what we're looking at. Lastly, I'll just deal with the 5 planning benefits that I think flow from this. Firstly, 5 new housing units. Secondly, a £1 million contribution towards affordable housing, community housing I should describe it. Thirdly, exemplar architecture, really high quality in replacement of 41. Fourthly, the restoration of the features of number 40. Fifthly, a dramatic improvement in the rear elevation, which is a real hodgepodge. And it will restore and reuse these long derelict buildings, which have been derelict for at least 12 years, if not more.
Thank you very much. We now move on to questions. Colleagues, who would like to ask a question? Yes, Councillor Dentcode.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Ford about having heard the response to your comments, to the applicant's comments there, if you're reassured or if you're still worried about the overdevelopment and mass scale and losing daylight and sunlight and sense of enclosure. I'm assuming you face onto the back of the building, or your flat is all the way through?
It's front and rear.
Okay.
But clearly the 6-metre roof terrace, which I enjoy, is the only outside space and relatively unique for the area. Hence I put a premium value on it in terms of my own enjoyment of the property. It's certainly as it was before, it was very vertical, and there's been a genuine attempt made by the applicant to try to ameliorate, soften it in some way, shape or form. However, it is minimal, and it's token, and understandably, perhaps commercially from their point of view, their brief was to maintain the 17,000 square feet development, not to actually compromise. The consequence of which is it compromises my outlook and my amenity from within my roof terrace. Had they said, okay, we'll sacrifice 2,000 feet or something, then from my point of view, I'd be sitting there thinking, I wouldn't have actually had any issue with it, I would have thought. But clearly, in the location, value is everything, and from my point of view, I'll be the one who'll be paying it because it will actually compromise my existing property. But clearly, the property has been vacant for as long as I've lived there. Not quite actually, but it's lived for some time. It is a bit of an eyesore for the area, and I accept all that, which is why I was proposing some sort of continuance to enable the improving relationships which the consultation relationships I've had now with the applicant, which didn't exist before, to try to actually find a compromise scheme which would actually protect and my living quality from where I'm living just now, and somehow reconcile that with their own profit ambitions.
Okay, can I ask a supplementary?
Is it on the, because I have a follow-up, if it's on the same point, then you go first. If it's on a different point, then, yeah. Okay.
So I'm looking at the map here. So your terrace is west-facing?
Southwest facing.
Southwest facing. So anything that increases the blockage of the sun at the back will affect you straight away because you're on the north side, not the south side. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, just sorry to labour the point, but I think it is the key point. Can you just, so you say that your sense of enclosure will become worse. Can you paint a little bit more of a picture for us on what it's like at the moment and what it will be like if this gets built?
Okay. Well, it was actually one of the photographs which is,
maybe we could bring that photograph back up. Sorry, a photograph of the terrace which shows us some of the impact on sense of enclosure.
Yeah.
Sorry, just bear it with us. Oh, and which floor are you on? Sorry.
I'm the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors.
Third out of 5.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Oh, sorry, 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Yes,
I'm sorry. I'm with you. 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Okay.
So, I mean, at the moment, there is a stairwell, a copper stairwell, which is the extent of the, and that's I think 2.75. I'm looking at.
We have, sorry. Oh yeah, we've got. Could you tell us which slide you're?
There was a slide taken from the roof terrace showing the rear elevation of there we are, right?
Okay.
So that's me.
Yeah.
Right? And that copper stairwell is the extent of the rear of the property at 4140. And that's my back door, and that's the roof. That's the brick wall, and that's it. Now so I can look out across, quite extensive vista, some nice trees, all this sort of stuff that sits there. The idea is to Beneath me, there is no extension. The actual the property is extended only out, I think, to the second floor. So it's one floor below me. The idea is that above that, there'll be another 4 stories, which will go up. I think it is marginally higher, I think, than that existing, perhaps the same, but marginally higher, I think, than the existing copper stair tower. But it will come out. I think it comes out a couple of metres from where I have just now. So I go from, what did I say it was? The existing building line, I think, is 2.75 metres. I think it then goes to 5. The revised scheme is now 5.25 metres. So what I currently enjoy just now is quite significant and goes down, I think, to about 18 inches or something. So it's actually quite small. But that really is that's the crux of my.
So sorry, the 5.25 meters. That's what it's. How much it's going to extend out beyond your building?
Yes, at the moment it goes out. The building line, I think, is 2.75 meters. The refuse scheme went to 5.75 meters. The revised scheme here is 5.25 meters. So it goes out a little under 3 meters from what I have just now.
Okay.
I think that's right.
I'll just give the applicants an opportunity if they want to add or challenge any element of that. But thank you, that's very helpful. Yes, applicants team, anything you would want to add or challenge on that?
Well, I might ask the architect to speak because he's got the dimensions, but the extension beyond where the existing building is 1.4 metres, not the figure that's been given. And then there's the curved section of the bay window. Okay, well,
I think we'll take up this point with officers in the next section, just to try and get a bit more clarity. But anything else you want to add on that point of the sense of enclosure?
I think I probably said it. I think, because it's high up on the building and because you've got a nice view across and over buildings, the sense of enclosure, in my judgment, there is some loss of outlook, but the sense of enclosure is not unacceptable in that view, given its position and the cutback that we've made.
Okay, understood. Thank you, colleagues. Any other questions? No. Oh, yep. Just in the nick of time, Councillor North.
Could I just ask the applicants the original features in number 40, which are going to be retained, enhanced? Could you flesh out something like that?
Since he is here, Stephen Levrant is our historic buildings expert, and I'll ask him to answer that.
Yeah, the number 40 has undergone quite drastic mutilation in the past. These things happen to these buildings, but it is actually an interesting building because it relates to the previous Georgian character of the square, and that's why we wanted to keep it. And we want to reinstate that because the scale, the quality, the brickwork, everything else is something that should be preserved as part of that previous scheme that existed when the square was built before all the leases ran out. So everything that we can put back in that will be put back. Its principal significance is the front elevation, so you can see how the square developed over time just by looking at that. At the moment you can't, because you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know if you're looking at a 20th century building or 90, you just got no idea. But going back to the, and this is not speculative development, we know how it should look.
Yes, I did a bit of research on the damage during the Second World War that was gone, but the actual internal parts still exist. It was refunded as the facade, is that correct?
It's actually a bit more than that. It was damaged during the war, and they did lose a lot of it, but in fact, there are still elements left, which we've now uncovered. That parts of the floor structure still remain, parts of the brickwork remain. A lot has gone, but there's enough there to give us confidence that we can put something back which is contributing, is accurate, correct, and will add to that whole visual excitement of that side of the square.
Thank you very much. Right, we now move to questions to officers. So I'll ask the first one, is just try and get a little bit more clarity on measurements in terms of at the back of the property, how far the building extends versus its neighbour, and talking particularly about Mr. Ford's property. How far does it currently extend? How far will it extend under these proposals?
Thank you, Chair. I actually had some additional pictures in my presentation which might be useful to explain this, but also the pack within your report pack, there's a plan at the back, and it's the proposed third floor plan. It's the most useful to explain the current situation versus the proposed situation.
Is it a drawing or a
Yes,
CGI image?
it's a drawing.
Okay. Proposed third floor plan. Anyone found it? No, in the pack. Oh, in the slide pack.
I was
Oh, okay.
referring to your portrait pack just because the
Okay.
drawing's much bigger.
Right, yeah. Give us 1 second. Don't think it doesn't have page numbers. I can't see it. Okay, thank you. This one here. Yeah, if you could help. Thanks, Jane. Sorry, just bear with us 1 moment. Right, I think we all have it now.
Thank you. So you'll see on this plan that there's a blue dotted line. That's the current built form, so the photo that you saw showing the copper enclosed staircase, that blue dotted line represents that part of the existing building, and then you can see the proposed part of the building steps beyond that and then curves around. So the modification that's been made as part of this application was to slightly reduce that depth and increase that curve, so that the kind of sheer brick wall face was mediated somewhat to the boundary of number 43.
Okay, thank you. And do we, that is very helpful, but do we also have any measurements as to, I suppose it depends whether you measure from the top of the curve or whether you measure from the sort of party wall, but do we have any measurements of how far extended it will be compared to his property?
I might just jump in there because I think it's accurate. The additional depth is 1.4, as noted by the architect from the back face. But then obviously there's an existing projection of the copper staircase. So it could be that both measurements are correct. It's just that it's 1.4 deeper than what's there. That's my understanding.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Yes, Councillor Dentcote?
I just want to say I'm a bit confused about having finally found this plan. I think it's 42 Hans Place, not 43, isn't it? Is that what? So there's the outline of the plan for the proposed third floor is number 40 and 41. The building next door should be 42, shouldn't it? Not 43. Or am I misunderstanding this plan? Is that a mistake on the?
Well, maybe 42 doesn't exist anymore. I don't know. Yeah, sorry.
I thought Mr. Ford lived at number 42. Am I correct? Sorry.
If I can assist here.
If you just tell us your address. Beyond that, we can't discuss any further, I'm afraid.
Well, I was trying to...
Okay, go ahead.
I live in 43.
Yeah.
Okay.
And number 41 is actually a double-fronted building, so at one time it would have been 41, 42.
Right. Okay, got
Thank
it.
you.
That's very helpful, thank you. Right, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Yeah, just a quick query really. I was obviously, I think I'm the only person who was on the actual committee last time, and the main issues that we refused on were things like the fire safety, which it was felt the applicant should have had things prepared but didn't. My personal view as it was then, and I think the committee at that time, was that the design is actually a huge improvement on what is there currently. It's always nice to get an application from Finchaston. I think if they did more of the borough, we might be a better place. But just on the query of biodiversity and green, the issue that there, I know their view is that there's no need for biodiversity net gain, but a personal request is if we could put in something for swift boxes, sort of an addendum to ask them if they might consider some swift boxes on the building. That might help the biodiversity. And I don't know if it's possible for either S106 or ENSO to ask for a small contribution towards trees. Is that something that we could consider if we're feeling they haven't overcome?
Probably only as an informative, but I will put it to the officer team.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we could include an informative to say that if that could be incorporated for biodiversity, that would be great.
Yeah, we'll do that.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. No further questions. Okay. So let's proceed to a decision. We've added that informative. I mean, I think there's no doubt about it. There is an impact on the sense of enclosure on the neighbouring properties, particularly number 43. And I can totally understand if I was a resident of that property, you know, I wouldn't be happy with that impact on my sense of enclosure. And if it was decided on that point alone, I think we'd ask the applicants to go back and think again. But we do need to weigh that against the benefits. And we've heard the benefits. I mean, there's obviously an aesthetic benefit to the conservation area, but particularly on the front, but also on the back. There are new homes being created, and there is a contribution to affordable housing as well. So those are three, real benefits which we need to weigh against the downside of sense of enclosure. So that's where we are. The recommendation is to grant planning permission. Please can I see all those in favour? All those against? So that's 4-1 in favour, so planning permission is granted. And thank you very much to everyone who joined us for that case. We will now move to number 25, Courtfield Gardens.
Thank you, Chairman. Application for members this evening is for the replacement of air conditioning and ventilation equipment on the roof, along with other associated works, to 25 Courtfield Gardens. On the screen before you is a site location plan with the red line denoting the application site. This is an existing aerial view. You can see the existing plant equipment on the top roof, and then also on the roof set down slightly has some extraction equipment on it also. This is a view from the street in front of the application site. You can see that due to kind of the height of the building, views are quite obscured and oblique to the roof part. This is the existing roof plan to the top of the screen and the proposed plan to the bottom of the screen. So the proposals include replacement of plant equipment on roof. This includes kind of the removal of some units and the addition of some other units, as you can see between these two comparative plans. The installation of an acoustic screen at roof level to the front of the building. This measures 1.9 meters in height. The replacement of a guardrail at roof level to the front of the building, and installation of balustrading to the sides of the building. This is the front elevation. You can clearly see here the incorporation of that acoustic plant screen. It's set back from the front of the elevation in line with the two existing chimney breasts, and then there is some balustrading to the front of that for the provision of access for maintenance. This is the existing and side elevation. You can see the incorporation of the balustrading to the side and the front there, and you can also see the removal of one of the large extraction units to to the kind of front, and then the installation of some more extraction and AC units to the kind of rearer part of the building roof. This is the existing and proposed side elevation. Oh, and that concludes the end of my presentation. The application has been supported by an energy assessment and a noise assessment, and both have been found to be compliant with policy. There would not be excessive noise beyond that of the existing background noise levels, and environmental health officers have reviewed and are happy with the proposal subject to the conditions listed within the officer's report. The design is considered to be acceptable, and there wouldn't be harmful impact to the character of the street scene or the conservation area. Officers recommend approval of the application subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, we have one applicant and one objector. Councillor Verboven, registered to speak in objection. Councillor Verboven, you have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Oscourt Gardens and Morton Mews Residents Association. For years, many residents have faced significant issues with the air conditioning system at the resident hotel. The current installation was not linked to any planning permission, making it essential that the proposed installation is treated as a completely new system. It must fully comply with all planning and environmental standards and ensure there is no nuisance to residents. The first request from the residents is that acceptable background noise levels be defined in absolute terms, not relative to current noise levels. The association requests that noise levels measured to the new installation at full power must not exceed 28 decibels, in line with environmental policy requirements. This is the same limit recently imposed on the neighbouring property to Barkston Gardens. Furthermore, this limit must be strictly enforced with a requirement that the system be immediately shut down if outdoor noise emissions exceed the threshold. To ensure compliance, the residents also request yearly maintenance and noise measurements conducted while the system operates at full power. The second concern is vibrations caused by the system. To address this, we strongly urge the entire system to be fully enclosed. The proposed partial noise enclosure, which only covers the road-facing side, is inadequate. A partial enclosure will merely redirect noise towards the residents and fail to address the noise and vibration issues effectively. A full enclosure is necessary to safeguard residents' living conditions. If anything, the sides adjacent to Morton Mews, Oscourt Gardens and Barkston Gardens should be enclosed. This would be a major improvement for all the residents. In summary, we request compliance with maximum noise levels aligned with current regulations, a commitment to regular maintenance and noise monitoring, and the installation of a proper enclosure around the system. The residents thank the committee for considering these requests and ensure that any new installation meets proper planning and environmental standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the applicant, we have Mr. Orr registered. Mr. Orr, hello. Mr. Orr, you also have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Tim. I'm CEO of Resident Hotels. We operate the Resident Kensington, and that has been a hotel since 2006. I do believe that we do have planning permission for the 2004 installation of the air conditioning. In short, I really do sympathise with neighbours to any hotel. I've been living in this ward for 16 years, and I totally understand the appropriateness of a good neighbourly environment. We have got a problem with our air conditioning because it is now old and it needs replaced, and really that is what we're trying to do. So we're certainly very happy to listen to the specific technical concerns of neighbours. We believe that as per the officer's report, the proposals are compliant. We absolutely would love to be able to get on and replace this obsolete air conditioning in order to be able to ensure a peaceable, neighbourly environment for the people in Morton Mews and adjacent Earls Court Road. Obviously, there are a number of environmental factors that all of us live with in that area of town. You have obviously the tube as well as lots of traffic going through. But we understand the points made. We believe that we are compliant, but we're happy to listen to any more that either officers or that the committee suggest.
Thank you very much. So I'll ask the first question for Mr. Orr. I understand that the sound tests are environmental health officers are happy with them, that they comply with our policies. What I wasn't sure about, though, is how they compare to the current equipment. Do you have any comparison between what's proposed and what's currently there in terms of sound?
I don't, but I do know that we've had multiple failures of the current equipment. We've had 4 in 2022, 4 in 2023, and 5 this year. When the equipment fails, it can make a lot of noise, and I'm certain that aside from any other issues, that's when obviously neighbours have particularly noticed the problem. The measurements have been based on the new specified equipment to replace the existing equipment and compared to the existing equipment's specifications, which I'm not 100% sure if they are being met at the moment.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, questions? Yes, Councillor North.
Yes, thank you. Just following on from what the applicant said, I'd like to ask Councillor Verboven, are the residents that you represent here today not pleased by that reassurance that the new equipment is going to be of a higher standard and that the existing equipment is obsolete? So in effect, and I will check this with officers, that the performance and the sound level will actually be less than it is currently?
Residents are certainly pleased that with new equipment, that they're not wanting to stop the replacement of the equipment because of the experiences that they've had in the last few years. They just want to make sure that everything is rightly insulated. So, for instance, there is a acoustic screening, but only on one side that is street facing, and that is not on the side towards our residents in Oscourt Gardens and Morton Mews. So they would have liked to have seen something similar on their side to protect noise going in their direction, for instance.
And if I may ask the obvious follow-up to the applicant, would you consider that as an additional condition to this to be acceptable?
The reason that it isn't in the current proposal is because it was genuinely felt that it wasn't necessary, but it has been raised. Our advice is that it is not necessary, but we would obviously look at it, and if that happens to be a way of making progress on this matter, I would accept that.
I think we'll address it with officers. My only slight worry is that could visually increase the bulk, so it might have a downside as well as an upside, but we'll discuss that in the next section. Colleagues, any other questions? No. Okay, in which case we move on to questions to officers, and I think the first question is on that. What are the upsides or downsides of requiring acoustic enclosures on the sides facing Oscourt Gardens and Morton Mews?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it would be difficult to condition that as part of this application because it would be a material change to what's currently proposed. So there would be extra kind of considerations we would need to take in terms of character and appearance and visual amenity of the conservation area. So it would be difficult to amend the scheme through a condition in that respect. I also think that there would likely be harm to the character and appearance if we were to kind of increase further bulk and additions at roof level, especially through kind of quite large acoustic screens, which I think would be required in this instance.
Yeah, okay, no, that's understood. I mean, I think there is an image which shows, let's say in our pack, 1 second. I suppose the front elevation, we can see that if you were to enclose that off, it would be quite significantly larger. Now that may or may not be acceptable, but I take the officer's point that would need additional assessment, so it would be hard to add it at committee. Yes, Councillor Coate.
Thank you. I do remember from application meeting many years ago, we were having a long discussion about what is acceptable as noise, and the chair at the time said, if you can hear it, then it's broken the rule. So I don't know if that's, especially at night, obviously, because with less very low background noise. So that's what I was told, and this is what I've always stuck to, that if neighbours can hear it at night with very little background noise, then it's broken a rule. Is that correct still?
So I think there's a bit more nuance than that. We have to take into consideration kind of the RBKC noise SPD and the policies set out within the local plan, and we have quite strict noise assessments which have to comply with certain tests set out in that. And as alluded to by the applicant, they are based on existing measurements taken, and then that defines the background noise level, and then that's what the plant has to be in compliance with at a decibel ratio below that. They're set out in the conditions at the end of the report, so if they do go over those, then that would be a breach of the condition. But I don't think it goes as far to say that if you can hear it, it would be unacceptable. It has to be within the kind of findings of the acoustic report that have been scrutinised by the environmental health officers and found to be acceptable.
Can I ask it?
Yes,
so when they're measuring background noise, obviously in an area like that, during the day there's a lot of background noise, and at night there's very little. So how do they measure that, or is it measured throughout the day? Because I do know that noise at night can drive people literally insane. So this is obviously a concern, and they've suffered a lot. I want the reassurance of what is supposedly acceptable.
Yeah, totally. So the baseline background noise is taken over a 24-hour period. So it takes into account daytime and nighttime assessment of that, and then it takes averages of those measurements, and then it finds the baseline through those periods. So it is measured over a 24-hour period, both in the day and at night.
I think we might want, sometimes we add a condition that just the equipment has to be tested again post-installation to make sure it does, actually once it's in situ, it complies with all our tests. Would colleagues want to add that condition? Yeah, okay. Could we add that condition, post-installation testing?
Absolutely. Would you like me to add that as a separate standalone condition, or would you like me to add it on to condition 3, which deals with the noise from the building services and plant?
Just as I think we've done it before as a standalone, so we'll just add it as a standalone. I mean, I do know that there are some positive elements in the conditions around maintenance. Sort of the device not just meeting the standards now, but has to be continually maintained, and if it's at any point in its life unable to comply with the condition, then it has to be switched off immediately. So there are some fairly robust conditions in there. Colleagues, any other questions? No. Okay. In which case we move to a decision. We've added one condition on post-installation testing. The recommendation is to grant. Can I see all those in favour? So that's unanimously in favour. So planning permission is granted. And thank you to both of you who came to speak on that case. We now proceed to flat 411 Palace Gardens Terrace.
Thank you, Chairman. So the next item on tonight's agenda is flat 411 Palace Gardens Terrace. The application site contains a mid-terraced Victorian building located on the western side of the road. The property is subdivided into residential units or flats, with the present application relating to flat 4 located on the upper floors. This image provides a context of the front to the side. Planning permission is sought in this case for alterations at main roof level, consisting of the creation of a terrace, provision of planters, and the installation of a glazed roof access housing. The proposed terrace would be set back 2.7 metres from the front and 3.4 metres from the back. As such, the officer has concluded that it would have limited views and would safeguard the living conditions of those living nearby. It is noted that planning permission was granted in 2018 for a similar roof terrace at number 15 Palace Gardens Terrace, which is a material consideration for the purposes of determining the current application. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions in due course.
Thank you very much. So we have a speaker on either side of this case. So we're joined by Mr. Moshenson. Excellent.
Switch this on.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you. For myself, I own the garden flat, and the 2 other tenants in the building. The application went in from the top floor without any consultation or notification to the 3 of us. The applicant does not, in fact, own the roof, and he also would need consent from the freeholder, which is all 4 of us, to carry out this work. To be frank with you, we will object and we will not give consent. The reason we now come before you to object is for this reason, that if there is only 1 roof terrace on the west side of Palace Gardens Terrace, of the 100 cherry tree properties, there are only 10 roof terraces. The problem with the roof terrace and the 1 or 2 flats that have an external balcony is that the people have parties in the summer, and that noise travels down the 2 streets. It's got nowhere to go, so it moves around the street, and it can be extremely intrusive. And sometimes people call the council for help at night. Other times they call the security guards that have to be there at the moment because we're plagued by people either breaking into houses or driving off in other people's cars. Number 15 there were no objections to the planning application to number 15, and it's never caused a problem. In fact, the person who occupies the flat is a lady of mature years. I spoke to the freeholder today, who's a lady of even more mature years, who lives in the building, and said it's not really used at all. All the houses on the west side, with the exception of numbers 21 to 23, have what I think you're calling a butterfly-shaped roof. And the planning officials' suggestion that carving out of our roof a roof terrace will be compliant, so to speak, will be architecturally sympathetic to the building is something we don't agree with. The other problem with the roof terrace is that whatever you do, whoever is on that roof terrace is going to be looking into other people's bedroom and bathrooms, possibly on both sides, but certainly on one side, because they're at bedroom level. All those houses have got the bedrooms at the top. But the real concern is we will say almost certainly not agree to this development going ahead. But what will happen is if you give permission to this, the next application will come in and you'll be told that number 15's got it and number 11's got it, and therefore it's a foregone conclusion that there should be no more roof terraces. And we consider that a dangerous precedent. Noise is something that affects us all, and the beauty of Brunswick Gardens and Palace Gardens Terrace is that insofar as it's been possible, their quietness has been preserved. I think I'm done in 3 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And are we, sorry, I've got my piece of paper. We're joined by Ms. Priest for the applicant. Ms. Priest, thank you for joining us. You have up to 3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening to the Chair and to the members. I'm Katie Priest from Katie Priest Town Planning. I'm here to speak on behalf of Mr. Zandy, who's the leaseholder and the occupier of the flat 4. The proposal is for a discreet and centrally located and screened outdoor terrace on the roof, and it's very similar to that approved recently, 2 doors down at number 15. The flat at number 4 doesn't have any private outdoor amenity space at the moment. Therefore, the proposed roof terrace will result in a material planning benefit by improving the quality of this existing residential accommodation by providing that outdoor space. The proposed roof terrace would be enclosed by trellis and would be set back significantly from both the front of the roof and the rear parapet of the roof. So it's just located in the centre. The setback will result in only very limited impact of the roof terrace. It will not be seen from the street scene, and it will only be visible in glimpsed views from the top floors of some neighbouring buildings. As such, its impact is minor and acceptable. The design of the proposed roof terrace has taken its cue from the approved applications at number 15 Palace Gardens Terrace, 2 doors along. It's notable that in the officer's report for one of the approved applications at number 15 it states, the proposals in this case are considered to be architecturally sympathetic to the building and would ensure that the majority of the roof would remain intact. The terrace would be visually discreet and would not harm the street scene. The terrace would preserve the character and appearance of the surrounding area and as such is considered acceptable in this respect. The same is true for the proposal before you. With regard to residential amenity, the setback will ensure that there is actually no increase in overlooking into rear gardens or windows of neighbouring properties. If you think about it, the existing flat below has windows at the front and the rear, whereas the roof terrace is set back significantly by over 2 metres on both sides, so it's actually much further away from the rear or front than any of the existing building windows are. As such, there will be no increase in overlooking of neighbouring properties to which already exists. And with regard to noise and disturbance, similarly to the approved roof terrace at number 15, the location at the top of the building in the centre would reduce the potential to cause any undue levels of noise and disturbance to occupiers of neighbouring properties. It must also be considered that neighbouring gardens where residents are free to use those can also be sources of noise. It's exactly the same. It's an outdoor amenity space used by residents. Also, I note the objections with regard to the freehold and leasehold issues and consent from the freeholders. I have to just raise that this is a separate legal issue. It's not a material planning consideration, and it shouldn't form part of your decision making here this evening. So overall, this scheme has a very limited impact, but has a lot of benefit to the residents of the flat. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, questions? Councillor North.
Thank you. This is a road I'm very, very familiar with, and it is a beautiful road with very handsome buildings. I'd like to speak to the objector and say that whatever the decision this planning committee make tonight, as you've already heard, there was a legal situation that means that work cannot commence until the freeholder gives that permission, so that reassurance you automatically have. I'd like to say to the applicant, in that being the case, what is your decision to bring this to planning tonight if you already know that this won't go ahead from the freeholders aspect?
The applicant, who I'm speaking on behalf of, has taken legal advice on this. I'm afraid I don't know the outcome, but other than that, it's a separate issue and shouldn't impact on the outcome of the planning decision.
Colleagues, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Dentcote.
Yeah, roof terraces have been a bane of a lot of people's lives for a long, long time. I do know that, and you can't rely on people just to behave like your elderly neighbour, and which is the issue, and I wish they were licensed actually, so lots of people could have roof terraces, and of course lots of people don't have outside space, and that's not fair. But as Councillor North has just said, you have the option just to not allow this to go forward, as you say, would your concern be that if this one is agreed, that all the neighbours will continue to demand similar things, and without any control from yourselves, and that this will set
well,
a dangerous precedent in a very quiet road. Is that your? Is that one of your?
It may have a very detrimental effect on the street if it starts to spread. At the moment, there are, as I said, 10 houses out in over 100 that have them. The one that exists on the west side doesn't give any trouble, but eventually there will be trouble, and we know there will be trouble. Everyone here knows what's going to happen once this starts, and so that's why we've taken the trouble to come and oppose, because we could have stayed at home and just said no. We weren't consulted about this, which is another issue, but that detracts from the confidence we have about the way it will be treated in the future.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Zvedeniak.
Sorry, so when you say 10 other properties have them, does that mean they have rooftop terraces or some form of balcony or outside space? Is it how similar are they? Yeah.
So I got the information from the person who runs Cherry Trees, our housing, and all he said is that out of over 100 there are only 10 properties with what he called terraces. How big they are, what form they take, I can't help.
Any further questions? So now move to questions to officers. Any questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Dencode.
Yeah, I would to know, please, where are we with the whole issue about roof terraces, of which we've had so many debates over the years? Where are we legally and in planning terms about permitting roof terraces?
Oh, I can answer from planning. I mean, legally, the applicant's representative is correct. We cannot consider any legal impediment to the scheme. It may be true that if granted, that it may never be able to be implemented, but that's also not a guarantee, and so it's not a material consideration. It's not. In terms of planning policy, we do have a specific policy on roof additions and alterations, which does restrict alterations on unbroken terraces where these would cause harm to the character and appearance of the area. In this case, the officers concluded, given the significant setbacks from the front and the rear, there would be extremely limited views of the terrace in the first place, and therefore, by virtue of causing no harm, would preserve the character, appearance, and significance of the conservation area. It's for that reason and that lack of harm that the officers found compliance with the development plan when taken as a whole.
So sorry, can I just, aside from the overlooking issue, what about the potential for noise and nuisance? Is that included in the planning policy or not? Does that go straight over to environmental health and people are left with noisy neighbours? Where are we with that?
So any domestic noise and nuisance is controlled by separate regime and legislation. If there were particularly noisy neighbours and they, let's say, playing loud music and partying late into the evening, there are means of controlling that and restricting that. That's it outside of planning. In terms of planning policies, though, we do have policy CD9, which refers to the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers. So if a use was deemed to be particularly problematic or noisy or anything else, it could be refused on those grounds. However, this is a domestic property. It is a small terrace, so there's unlikely to be loads of people that could fit on the roof in the first place. And for that reason, it was not deemed to be a breach of policy CD9.
Yes, Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, I guess, on policy CD12, we do say that we normally resist additional roof level alterations where the terraces are broken, but only by isolated roof additions. We've had a bit about number 15, and the objector mentioned there's a few others on the street, but is number 15 the only one along this stretch? Could we get clarification on that?
Yeah. I think number 15 is the only one on that side of the road. I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Yeah.
So I guess what would officers' view be on why that policy doesn't apply?
Also, the number 15 was not something from the 70s. It was granted in 2018. But don't know if there's anything you would add to that.
Yes, so the one at 2015 was, the one at number 15 was granted in 2018 under the same policy wording. I know we have adopted a new local plan, but that the policy requirements remain largely the same. The reason that one was granted and the reason the current application is recommended for approval is due to the fact there would be extremely limited views of it, and so there would be no harm associated with the terrace. And that is a material consideration that needs to be considered. It's the same, a very similar debate we often have with mansard extensions and that sort of thing.
Any further questions? No. Right. Well, we proceed to a decision. I think we've established that the legal considerations around freeholders' permission, etc., aren't the remit of this committee, so we set those to one side. I think on an amenity point of view, I mean, we do generally encourage places to have outside space, and certainly any new buildings, we would encourage apartments to have some outside space for the residents. And what we're talking about here is 3 and a bit meters by 5 and a bit meters, so it's not excessive. It's a sort of fairly normal amount of outside space for an apartment to have. So whilst I understand residents' concerns, I think noise and nuisance caused by that would be governed by environmental health, and to my mind isn't a barrier in this case for granting planning permission. On the aesthetic issues, I mean, we heard it was the same decision that had to be taken in 2018, and it was deemed to be acceptable due to the limited views of the terrace, and it's the same wording we're applying now. So I think we do at the very least need to take that decision into consideration, that precedent into consideration when making a decision. Right, with that in mind, we proceed to a decision. The recommendation is to grant planning. Can I see all those in favour? All those against? So that's 4 against and 1 in favour, so planning permission is not granted. Can I hear a proposal, please, for reason? Don't know if... Anyone? Maybe, perhaps, Mr. Banks, I don't know, Ms. Ray, if you, having heard the debate, if you could maybe summarise a reason that one of the members might want to put forward. Is it predominantly on, and you might disagree amongst you, but is it predominantly on aesthetic grounds or noise, sort of environmental health, CD9 grounds?
It's both. It's disturbance to neighbours and also not in keeping with the character of the area.
That's really helpful. I was just going to suggest to Wade Banks whether it was one or the other. So it's very clear. So 2 reasons for refusal, one relating to the visual impact and that on the conservation area, and one relating to the impact on living conditions with specific regard to, I assume, overlooking and noise. Thanks.
Councillor North to propose. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Zbigniew to second. Can I see all those in favour? All those against? So that's passed 4 to 1 in favour. So planning permission not granted in that case. Colleagues, does anyone need to take a break before we move to the next case? Yes, small break. We'll take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene at 8:35. reconvene the meeting and we'll proceed to number 21 Silchester Road.
Thank you, Chairman. So we did have a objector registered to speak, but they've chosen not to attend tonight. I believe they were their concerns have been overcome. And given that the rest of the cases are not speaker cases, we don't have presentations. But I'll be happy to take any questions from the pack in due course.
I assume we've all read the report, so any questions on that case?
I just very quickly wanted to say that,
Yes.
I mean, the email isn't before you confirming they've been overcome, so I would still give full weight to the objections raised and everything in their submissions, just in case, because that wasn't something that was formally before you.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that. Colleagues, any questions? No, I don't have any questions on that one. In which case we move to a vote. Recommendation is to grant. Can I see all those in favour? So that's granted unanimously. Thank you. We now proceed to, if only they were all that easy. We now proceed to Shaftesbury Centre, 85 Balby Road.
Thank you, Chair. This one is for 4 members this evening. You might recognise it. It's been to you before, but it has taken a little bit longer to get the legal agreement drawn up. And since it last came to you, the new local plan has been adopted. So there's some alterations just in the addendum report setting out the new policy versus old policy, and the officers conclude that the assessment wouldn't result in a materially different recommendation. There's also a couple of amendments to section 106 obligation payment amounts, but other than that, the scheme before you is the same as that which was previously recommended for approval, as is this one. Thank you, Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much. No speakers on this one. Colleagues, any questions? No? Okay. In which case, we move to a decision. The recommendation is to grant. Can I see all those in favour? So that's unanimously granted. We now proceed to Barlow House on Walmer Road.
Thank you, Chairman. Similar to the previous applications, there's nothing in the addendum to note, but I'm happy to take any questions in due course.
Colleagues, any questions on this one? Councillor Dentcote.
Actually, it's not a question. Can I just comment on replacing?
Sure. Have a comment.
Sorry?
I said yes. Please go ahead.
Right, thank you. I just want to say that at some point we are so going to regret putting UPVC windows in all our council homes. They're not safe, they're not good, and they don't last. We are really going to regret it when probably about 15 years, and it's a massive mistake. Just rant over, but honestly, I found it deeply depressing. It is a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? No? In which case we move to a decision. The recommendation is to grant. Can I see all those in favour? All those against? And 1 abstention. So 4 in favour, 1 abstention, so planning permission is granted. We now proceed to 17 to 19 Pelham Place.
Thank you, Chairman. This is for the discharge of a conditions application for items including a CTMP, which members requested be called back to committee for determination. There's no objections to this application, and it's recommended to discharge conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Any questions? No. In which case we proceed to a decision. Recommendation is to grant. Is it to grant or to discharge? To discharge. Recommendation is to discharge. Can I see all those in favour? So that's unanimous. So the condition is discharged. We now proceed to our final case, 26 Kempsford Gardens.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an RBKC own application, and it's for the replacement of windows like for like, but with double glazing. Recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Good to see timber windows being used in this application. Yeah. Any questions, members of the committee? No. In which case we proceed to a decision. The recommendation is to grant. Can I see all those in favour? So that's unanimous. The Planning Permission is granted, which brings us to the conclusion of tonight's meeting. Thank you all very much.